Hello, I'm Taylor, and I would like to introduce our next speaker for Psychology Day, who will be talking to us about emerging technologies and their psychological impact. Dr. Chaudhry is an assistant professor in the School of Computing and Informatics, where she leads data and design NIST. Her research interests lie in human-computer interactions and health informatics, and she enjoys traveling to exotic places and spending time at home. Dr. Chaudhry, if you will.
And Dr. Chaudhry, you are on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So are you able to see my slides now? The slide?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so I'm going to start with, so I'm slightly changed my title of my talk. It's now Psychological Effects of the Emerging Technology, but the idea is the same. So I wanted to cover a lot of different emerging technologies, but I did a small practice of this talk yesterday, and I just realized I don't have time to cover everything. So mostly we are going to stay with studying or learning about the psychological effects of virtual reality environments on humans. So I want to start with how we understand, how we visualize human beings in computer science. So we kind of take the view of the cognitive psychology, which breaks down a human being basically into three main systems. So we first have the perceptual system, which consists of our sense organs like eyes, ears, skin, and that is responsible for registering or receiving stimulus from the environment, from the outside world. And then we have this second system, which is the cognitive system, that is responsible for processing all the stimulus that is being received from the environment. And then finally, we have the motor system, which is going to be basically our cognitive system is going to process the information and send the output to the motor system, which is then going to interact with the environment to kind of show what is the human's response to the stimulus. So this is kind of what it looks like. So we receive stimulus, it goes to different stages, and then finally it comes back through our motor system. Okay, so this understanding of human beings, the human being being made up of these three different systems is kind of helps us realize that when we are interacting with computers, we are actually performing a cognitive act. It's not just physical or motor performance or motor action. We are actually being cognitively engaged with computing devices. So how? Because the computer in our interactions with computers, the computers are playing the role of the environment. So they are sending us the stimulus. So on the screen, on the computer screen, we're going to see graphics. We're going to hear some sound generated by the sound card. So all this stimulus is going to be received by our perceptual system, and then our cognitive system is going to process it, and then we are going to generate a response through our effectors, our fingers, or even our eyes, or maybe we speak as well sometimes to our computers. So we have to understand our interactions with computers as a cognitive act. So that means anything, that means that computers or the technologies can produce some impact on our brains as well. Okay, so this is what we are going to focus on, how computers are impacting our brain, our minds. So first I want to look at the first emerging technology, or basically this is what we're going to study today, is the metaverse. So is anybody familiar? How many of you are familiar with the term metaverse? Okay, so metaverse is, all right, so metaverse is basically is a term, it's given to the evolution of the internet into a virtual world in which people will interact with their digital selves or avatars with each other. So basically you can think of this as the evolution of the Facebook or the social media, where in the social media we were just basically interacting with each other using text or maybe images, graphics, videos. But in the metaverse, we are going to be able to interact with each other through 3D objects. Okay, so it's going to be, there's going to be a virtual space, 3D virtual space, and we'll go in there and we'll see other people walking around as avatars, and we will be able to interact with them the same way we interact with them in the existing social networking environments. And in the metaverse is kind of more attractive because the kind of things, so you will be able to do a lot of different things. For example, if you are maybe interested in setting up a virtual cafe, you'll be able to build your cafe in the virtual world. If you are interested in, let's say, organizing a concert, you will be able to organize a concert, to set up your own concert. And so it's going to give you the ability to express yourself in a lot of different ways. Obviously, you can do everything in the physical world as well, but this metaverse is going to let you do things that you're not able to do in the physical world. At least that's what we are being told. So it's going to be a more enhanced kind of experience. So now, because the metaverse is coming, we have to understand what implications it's going to have on us. And from my description of metaverse, you should be able to break it down into two main things. So you can think of metaverse as being consisting of virtual world and social media at the same time. So we're going to look at the impact of each of these different medias or technologies on humans using existing research. Okay, so first of all, what is virtual reality? We know that initially virtual reality was mostly used for gaming. But now it's being used for pretty much everything that we can think of. It's being used in businesses. It's being used to treat patients for various kinds of diseases, conditions. It's being used in education to enhance learning experiences. And studies show that when we are in virtual environments, there's some changes in our brain. So our brain doesn't look the same. The activity that we notice in our brain is not the same as what we notice in the physical world. So let's look at some of the research that has been done to understand this. So first, I want to talk about the research that has been done to understand what kind of impact virtual reality creates on our hippocampus. Okay, so hippocampus is a part of the brain that's responsible for creating memories. And another function that it performs is that it's able to create cognitive maps of the environments, meaning, so you all know this because you are psychology majors. So I'm just going to skip over this. So this is what, two main functions of the hippocampus. So there was a study in 2014 by researchers at UCLA. And what they did was they inserted electrodes inside the brains of the mouse, and the mouse was still alive. And they released the mouse in a physical maze, and then simulated like a computer generated maze. And they found out that the hippocampal neurons of the mouse were acting differently in both environments. So in the physical environment, so in the virtual environment, the neurons, they seem to be firing randomly. It seemed like there's like no pattern going on, but in the real world, it was behaving just normally. Another difference that they noticed was that in the virtual world, more than half of the neurons in the hippocampal area, they were not active, but they were all active in the physical environment. Okay, so you can see that there is definitely something going on. The virtual world is creating some impact, is creating some changes in our hippocampus area. So the same study also found out that the communication that is happening between the neurons of the hippocampus, it also seems to be different. So in the virtual world, the communication that was based on the intensity, it broke down. But the communication between neurons that was based on the rhythm of the signal, that was similar to the what they would notice in the real world. Okay, so the communication is dependent on the intensity and the rhythm of the signal. So the communication that is based on the intensity that was being impacted. Okay, so this was just something that they've discovered, and they're just trying to, the researchers basically stated that they are still trying to understand what this means. What do these changes, what does this disruption really mean? Because otherwise the mouse appeared to be just behaving normally in both environment. It was it's just at the cellular level, there's some changes happening. Okay, so this study was done in 2014, and then a lot of other studies kept happening. But in 2019, there was another study in which the researchers, they tried to understand whether virtual reality can help create memories, help people form memories or strengthen their memories. So they created a memory palace in a virtual environment, and then they created a memory palace in a 2D environment on a desktop. And it was found that the people were able to okay, sorry. Okay. So okay, so yeah, so they found out that the people were able to do a better recall. People were able, after being exposed to the virtual world, they were able to do a better recall of the items in the memory palace. But their recall of the items in the memory palace that belonged to the desktop, that wasn't, that was like 8.8% less. So basically what it means that when we try to remember things in the virtual reality environment, or the virtual reality environment helps us memorize things better. And as a result, we can recall those things later on. Okay, but the desktop environment doesn't really work as well. Okay. All right. So the next studies still at the cellular level, we don't know what it means. Why are we able to recall or remember things better in the virtual world? So the same researchers who did the first study that I showed you with mouse, they did another study very recently last year. And they found out that actually in the virtual world, the neurons they have some different electrical rhythms in different parts of the neurons. So then this is like the cell body, and these are the dendrites. So they noticed that the electrical rhythms in the cell body is different from the electrical rhythm that's in the dendrite area. So this was something that they did not know before they did the study. So they found out that they thought that maybe the virtual reality is responsible for creating these two different rhythms in the cell, in the neurons. But then they did another study, and they found out that actually these differences also exist in the real environment, but in the virtual environment, the difference between the rhythms, it intensifies. Okay, so meaning that it was just, the difference was so small or almost negligible in the real world that they never noticed it, but in the virtual world, the difference was big enough to be noticed. So again, we see that the virtual world is having some impact on us at the cellular level. Okay. Okay, so this was all based on what happens inside our brain. How does virtual reality make our brain work differently? But then there are also studies that are being done to understand what kind of impact virtual reality can have on our behaviors. So our behavior, what we do, how does it change us? So for this one, a lot of we know that virtual reality is now being used to treat a lot of problematic behaviors in people. So for example, people with some mental health issues, for example, people who are not able to who are experiencing maybe post-traumatic stress disorder or experience different kind of phobias, or maybe who have difficulties managing their pain. So they are actually in virtual reality, they are able to they can design virtual reality environment to help people deal with these different behavioral problems. So again, at this, our understanding of how virtual reality is impacting us at the cellular level, that's still very limited, but we know that it does have an impact on our behavior. And that's why it's being used in the controlled virtual reality environments are being used to treat patients for different kinds of illnesses. And some of them I've shown you here. Okay. And another thing that virtual reality is being used for is it's often used to teach empathy. There are tons of studies that have been done to study what kind, whether we can use virtual reality to teach empathy to people. So for example, can we teach people how to appreciate other cultures by exposing them to the virtual simulation of that particular culture? Or can we help people understand experiences of an elderly person, to train, for example, the caregivers, by exposing them to this simulated environment? And all these studies have shown that positive results that the virtual reality does help create empathy in people. Okay, and then it has also been shown that the virtual reality can have an impact on our self-perceptions, how we view ourselves. It can, help change that as well. So think about it like how do we know ourselves? We know ourselves through, we look at ourselves in the mirror, and that's how we know ourselves, that this is what we look like, right? That's how we recognize ourselves. So the virtual reality is kind of being used to do similar things. So now we are looking into the virtual reality and we are seeing an avatar which is supposed to represent us, so it will do everything that we are doing in our physical world. So that means that we can create avatars to, however we want to see ourselves, we can create such avatars to change our self-perceptions. So this is and obviously this can be used for to treat some illnesses. For example, it has been used to treat anorexia and other such health issues in people. But we know that it has other implications as well. Okay, so these were some of the good sides of virtual reality we went through, but now I'm just going to show you some maybe negative effects and some problems with virtual reality. So first, I want to talk about the optical flow issue. So the idea of optical flow is that our view of the world is always changing, right? It's not static. So depending on where we are, how close or far away from a certain object we are, we're going to see a different view of it. And when we change our distance from that object, then our view or how we are viewing that object is also going to get changed. So this is very easy in the real world, right? Because this is how we are designed to process the world around us. But this has to be programmed. This optical flow has to be programmed inside the virtual world. So unless and until you are a very good programmer or very good algorithms have been designed to create such seamless flow changes in the view, the virtual reality environment is just going to look really, uncomfortable. So, but this is something that's very difficult to achieve. This is a difficult problem to achieve in the virtual reality world. So, and this is something that we have to keep in mind, that unless and until we are dealing with a very well-designed virtual world, we're not going to have a very good experience with it. Okay. Another issue with when we are working we are dealing with virtual reality is that a lot of people experience sickness, right? We experience, these are some of the sickness issues we have all experienced in virtual reality, maybe nausea, dizziness, disorientation, motion sickness symptoms. And this is because we could be things in the virtual world could be moving, everything around us in the virtual world could be moving, but we are just standing still as we are interacting with the virtual world, right? So because of this difference, our body is giving us a different signal that we are standing still, but our eyes are telling us that we are moving. So this kind of this conflict, because of this conflict, we experience sickness. And, this can obviously different people can have experience different levels of this sickness. Okay. So another issue with the virtual reality is the addiction problem, right? So addiction is basically something, which is we can experience with anything, right? It could be substance, with the thing, with the behavior. So, and we all know that there are always like few people, if we look at this as the normal distribution, we know that few people are lying at the extreme ends of the spectrum, right? Most people are, we would expect them to be normal. So hopefully this is what we are going to see with the metaverse as well, that the most people will use it normally, but very few people will be using it very extremely, and they will run into this issue of addiction. But so yeah, how do we recognize addiction? So addiction is, this is just something so that you all are aware of it. I'm sure you already know this as being psychology majors. But addiction happens when we are, the behavior that we're engaging in is leading to non-performance of other obligations, things that need to be get done. You're ignoring them. You're just ignoring the issues that are arising because of your engagement with the behavior. For example, you're having a headache, because of you have been using VR for so long, but you refuse to like get out of that space, just to make yourself feel better, right? So that's just one of the signs that you are actually addicted to virtual reality, right? Or something, if you're not taking care of yourself. And also another sign of addiction is that when you are not able to do something or when you're not able to engage in that behavior, then you start feeling frustrated. So these are some three main signs that sometimes a behavior is becoming addictive. So we have seen this problem with VR as well. People are becoming addicted to VR. So there was about a few years ago, there was like a study in Japan, and this is not just to say anything about Japan, it can happen in any part of the world, but this study was done in Japan, and they found out that about 1 million people, they were just refusing to leave home, and they were just preferring to spend their time in the virtual worlds playing games. And in some extreme cases, it was found that the children died because of neglect. Their parents were so engaged, so immersed in the virtual world that they refused to, take care of their responsibility, to fulfill their responsibility. And it was also found that a lot of people were just engaging in like surreptitious behavior in the virtual worlds, so some unnecessary kind of simulations were happening that were having a bad impact on minor children. Okay, so these kind of things have happened with VR as well. And other problems that are like a consequence of addiction is, naturally, if you are going to be addicted to VR and or anything else, then because you're not taking care of yourself, certain chemical imbalances are going to start happening in your body. And it has been found that people have started, because of the overuse, people have suffered depression. They have been having sleeping problems. Psychosis has also happened, paranoia, increased aggression. So these are some of the issues that we have seen happening in the as a result of the addictive or overuse of virtual reality. Okay, so these are all just from, we know that, addictive behavior is just going to happen in few people. Most of the people are going to stay the same. And also maybe some of the effects that I talked about, like the negative impacts, like the sickness and the optical flow problems, those are kind of just like short-term problems, right? But we are talking about, when we're talking about metaverse, we are concerned about what's going to happen in the long term, right? Because we know that right now people are addicted to social media, like people are addicted to their Facebook account, like pages, right? They're always checking out who's posting what. So the thing is that right now we don't really know what would be the long-term impact of engaging in the virtual world. So what is going to be the long-term impact of metaverse? We don't know at this stage. So at worst, it's possible that, we are just going to be divorced from reality. We are just going to be so addicted, so enjoying the virtual world so much that we forget to smell the roses, like they say. Or, we are just not computing, our brain stops computing the real world, and as a result, when we leave the virtual world to fulfill our other needs, like, because we are going to still stay as humans, then we might experience like some delusions and psychotic symptoms. Okay. So these are the things that we need to be aware of. So this just tells us that we need to be like very conscientious, and we have to use metaverse responsibly, because if we don't, then we can run into some serious problems. Okay. So we have looked at virtual reality and, some problems and some beneficial uses of it. And now I wanted to switch over to social media. So this is a kind of like a diagram that explains how social media use is related to our psychological well-being. Okay, so this is from a research paper. So the researchers identified basically four mediators, that four main things that can have an impact on our psychological well-being, and these are coming out of the social media use. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the bonding of the social capital. So basically, this one is just saying that social media use helps us form bonds with our friends, relatives. We are able to find people online, and then be able to create friendships with them. So this is obviously, it's good to have this kind of human to human relationship, right? So this is going to have a good impact on our psychological well-being. Okay, the fact that social media will help us connect with other people, a lot of different people, right? People we can learn from and we exchange ideas from. Then social media use can also help us bridge social capital, meaning that we're not just forming these relationships with other people, but we are also leveraging these relationships to benefit ourselves. So when we need something, we call upon our social network to find help, to find solutions to the problem, and so on and so forth. So again, this has a positive social psychological effect on us, right? So the first two mediators, they're telling us, okay, so because social media helps us find people and seek help from people, we are going to have experience psychologically, we're going to have it's going to have a good impact on us. But this third mediator, it's saying that actually social media use can also lead to social isolation, right? So although we are connected to a lot of people, we are able to seek help from a lot of people, but at the same time, people are just feeling lonely. They describe it as lonely, like as in the sad, lonely, like they don't feel like they really know anybody, so this physical connection is still missing. It's just more virtual level connection. So people are experiencing social isolation because of the social media use, and that's having a negative impact on their psychological well-being. Okay. And then another thing that social media use is leading to is obviously smartphone addiction. So if you are just, again, this is related to overuse of social media. If you're just going to be on social media all the time, then most of the people are accessing their social media through their smartphones. So overuse of smartphone, social media is directly related to overuse of smartphone, and then consequently addiction of smartphone. And when you are addicted to smartphone, it just automatically means that you're going to use other kinds of apps and resources that are available on your phone, and that's just going to exacerbate the problem. You're just being exposed to a lot of content and a lot of information, and it can create cognitive overload and other kind of problems. So so this is a negatively impacting our psychological well-being. And then it was also found that social media, the smartphone addiction is actually creating another kind of social problem in our society, right? So it's called phubbing. How many of you are familiar with this term? No, nobody. Okay, so let me just explain it with the help of this diagram. So this is an example of phubbing. Okay, so what's happening in phubbing? So this is phubbing is you can think of as it's a word that's made up of phone plus snubbing, right? So when somebody is using phone to kind of ignore your presence, or to kind of not acknowledge your existence, right? So this is it's creating this problem of phubbing, right? And it's obviously phubbing is, it might look like a small thing, but it's actually creating bigger social problems, like the relationships are being destroyed. Again, phubbing is related to people ignoring their problems, their responsibilities, right? So again, the phubbing has led to neglect of children, like children are being ignored, their health is being ignored. So these are just some of the things, and this was my last slide. So these are some of the things that I found, and I thought it's interesting to share, and we should all be aware of as we are moving into this new era of metaverse. And I know everybody's going to be really excited in the beginning to jump into the metaverse and create their virtual worlds and do things that they are not able to do in the physical world. But we also need to be just aware of how we should be engaging with this new media that we are going to get exposed to. So I think the main lesson that I learned is that we need to be aware of two things. We need to limit control our use of this of the emerging technologies, so we should maybe time ourselves. We should not overuse it. And secondly, we should also be controlling the kind of content that we are exposing ourselves to. So I think if we are able to just monitor these two things, time and content, then I think we shouldn't be so afraid of technology, and we shouldn't really look at it as something negative. It can be a very positive thing as well, but it's power is in our hands. So so this is all I wanted to say. So I don't know if I'm supposed to give you time to ask questions, but we do have 5 minutes. Okay, yes.
Oh, thank you. Very interesting. Oh, it's gonna.
Yes, I think Christy, Dr. Christy has Christy Charles.
Rick, do you want to go first, or did you have a question, or are you just the moderator?
I'm just sort of stepping in, helping out with moderation.
Okay.
It's been no questions, so please.
Okay. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation. This idea of metaverses being talked about in the business world, in the workplace, particularly as we tackle working from home. So I just kind of wanted to hear more thoughts from you regarding either research or practical implications as far as the metaverse component of what you discussed.
Practical implications are in terms of
The metaverse, yeah, yes, ma'am.
like how it's going to impact our social interactions. Or maybe,
yeah, I'm just any thoughts you have, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be, I haven't really thought about it in so much detail, but I think it's just, I'm just afraid that it might, again, lead to like overload, maybe work overload. Like, so first of all, we'll have to overcome the learning curve. There's a learning curve that's going to be involved, right? So we'll have to learn some new techniques of doing things, new ways of doing old things. So, that's going to be something that we need to be aware of. And then, another thing I'm thinking that maybe we'll just have to do more than necessary. Again, like the paperwork issue, like we have to fill out forms all the time. So I'm just thinking that maybe we'll just have to create avatars all the time for new things, and then just going to be extra work, things that we didn't want to do, but now we are being forced to do. But yeah, so it's just, I feel like maybe, it can have that kind of impact on us. But I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's in the School of Education, and she was kind of very excited about it, and was telling me that she's going to use it to teach children in the kindergarten, right? So they are going to get exposed to it at a very early age, and so their perception of, I think, reality is going to be quite different from ours if they're going to get, but we have to control the amount of time that they're going to be exposed to, in this environment. Yeah, I think it's going to have some, both, again, positive and negative, and it's just like a, knife, like people can use it for, responsibly, or they can just use it for nefarious reasons. So yeah, I think it's just one of the tools. We definitely going to become more powerful in terms of our ability to do things, and imagine the different ways of doing things. Yeah, but it has to be used responsibly.
Yeah, I'm very excited for any sort of research to come out regarding the pros and the cons. You stated it beautifully. I love your analogy of the knife. It could be used in a healthy manner or unhealthy. I'll briefly share, and then I'll turn it over to the next person. It just reminds me of how we used Zoom, and for some students it was great because it encouraged engagement. Some of your shyer students were able to communicate. So I'm just very intrigued to see how this is going to work in the workplace. But thank you so much for your presentation and your response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Okay, I think it's just 1 minute left, I guess. So if anybody wants to share their thoughts, that'd be good.
We had a couple chat comments. Dr. Carmilla Hatchbed said, I was particularly interested in the use of VR with empathy. I wonder if the uncanny valley would extend out of robots to VR simulated people.
Yes, it's this is an issue in VR as well, the uncanny valley issue. But it's been studied, but at the same time, they are there's a lot of research which is just shows that how easily people accept these avatars as extensions of themselves. So so that I haven't studied in a lot of detail, but yeah, so this is uncanny valley is an issue, but at the same time, people are just very willing and very readily accepting these avatars as extensions of themselves. So
Dr. McGivers has her hand up.
Hi there.
Hi.
A fascinating presentation. I, however, am not as smart as Erica. I do not know what an uncanny valley is.
So uncanny valley is Exactly, it's kind of like an experience that you feel. So if you, for example, if there's a robot, um, a few years ago, a lot of robots were created. They were called humanoid robots, and they were given like the skin, the material that was used to create the skin that was like very real. So from a distance, you couldn't really tell whether it's a robot or a human. So the robots look so human-like. But as you get closer and closer to the robot, you start noticing that, oh, okay, it's not a human, it's a robot. So that space where you start noticing the differences, you start seeing a robot as a robot, not as a human, that's called the uncanny valley. Where you kind of become aware of, what it truly is.
Okay, seems like an odd name for that, but that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, but it's also, Erica is saying it's connected to negative feelings towards a robot. So yeah, so when you enter the uncanny valley and discover that it's a robot, it's not a human, then you're going to have some negative feelings towards it. You're not going to trust it as much as you were able to when you were far away from it.
I can only relate this in regards to Star Trek, The Next Generation, and how they treated data. So I get it. Yeah.
I actually think that there might be some metaphor extensions of that experience in human-human interactions, where when people examine somebody else's behavior a little bit more closely and it doesn't match up to their expectations of quote unquote normal behavior, that people have this sort of reaction to the behavior of other humans. It's not that different than what's described here.
So does that explain my bad ratings on Rate Your Professor?
I do not think so, but who knows? Are there any other questions? We're a little bit over, but we're fine. We're fine in terms of time. Any other questions or comments?
I just found this so very interesting that people are doing this kind of work. I personally am not ready to do virtual reality, and I'm pretty sure I'm not ready for the metaverse. But it's interesting to learn about it. I actually have never tried virtual reality. I'm probably the only person I know who still hasn't done that, but there you go.
I have a little bit of I don't know, like a little slightly off track question, Dr. Chaudhry, if you're interested.
Yeah, sure, maybe I can.
One of the ways in which I've been exposed to some of the concepts in virtual reality and avatars is through various works in science fiction, as Dr. McIver's alluded to, and I was wondering if you find to what degree have you sort of been exposed to those, and if you have, do you find the ways that it has been depicted in those sources to have been helpful or harmful to general people's ability to understand and embrace these changes in our technology?
So you're saying that the way virtual reality has been presented in the media, whether whether they are trying to make it easy for people to accept it or not. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and also, like, are they accurate in the way they present it? Do you and obviously, you probably haven't seen every single instance, but to the extent that you have seen it, do you find that the presentation in the media is accurate? Is it helpful, or is it pushing the limits of what's
a lot of the so I'm gonna like talk specifically about the movies, I guess, because so yeah, a lot of the times when they do show like the advanced technologies in those movies, most of the time is actually very accurate and at the cutting edge or it's it's something that is already happening in like research labs, or it's something that is being proposed for the future, so it hasn't been done. So for the example is like the Minority Report, for example. The Minority Report, there was the main character, he was, I think he's like a police officer or something, and he's looking through the files of the how he does it. So that was actually based on research that was being done at MIT lab. This maybe like 1 year before that glove was developed in that lab, and they just kind of showed a more elaborate version of that glove in the movie. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the, and I actually attended one workshop at a conference where I forgot what's the name of the workshop, but in that workshop we basically learned about how these movies can be used to demonstrate the use of technology. So we call this technique, actually we use this technique in HCI, we call it scenario building, or sometimes it's called storytelling, where we kind of create a story. Either we'll write it down in text form, or we create like a video or movies, right, to demonstrate the working of new technology that is just we are thinking about developing. So it's used as one of the ways to explore ideas of how we can move this technology forward. So this is one way media is being used by researchers, HCI researchers, to develop technology, to move the ideas forward, to explore how it can be used. And the representation is something that we are striving towards, or it is actually happening. So it's not something that completely like fantastical that cannot happen, but it is possible most of the time. Yeah, actually every time that I've seen so far, but I might not have seen, I haven't seen all the movies, right? But yeah, I find them quite accurate. Yeah.
And any other questions or comments? Well, Dr. Chaudhry, I want to thank you for being willing to share such an interesting talk with us. And, it's been a very, very welcome addition to all of our presentations for.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed preparing the presentation and speaking to all of you today. Thank you so much.
I hope you can come back sometime and maybe finish this talk, because we didn't quite get through everything. Be interesting.
Yeah, there was actually
what else you
one.
had to say.
Yeah, I'm doing these like embeddable technologies, technologies that are going to become a part of our body basically. So I just didn't get time to get to that one, but that was something else that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, maybe we are not, we can wait for 1 more year or something before that happens. So yeah, but I think metaverse was more urgent. So yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Take care.
Okay, thank you all. And we have a 4 o'clock talk coming up. So if you're interested, I'll be opening that in a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.